Usually when we talk about bipartisanship, we're talking about horrible policies. So, the Iraq War, for example, was bipartisan. Wall Street deregulation was bipartisan. Various outsourcing bills were bipartisan. So, there's this notion, certainly in the media, that bipartisanship equals good. Like, it's just a good thing when you work together. And it's infuriating because, no, what matters is the substance of the bipartisanship. And so in many instances, it's like, oh, this isn't good. Stop. But every now and then, you get an issue where it's like, oh, that's spaced. I like that. Like, for example, Bernie Sanders and Ron Paul used to work together on areas where they agree, whether it be drug war stuff or civil liberty stuff or anti-war stuff. Recently it was Mike Lee and Bernie Sanders working together to try to stop the U.S. support for the Saudi genocide in Yemen. Of course, Trump vetoed that because he's paid by the Saudis. But here we have a super rare instance of phenomenal bipartisanship from people you wouldn't even expect. This is astonishing to me. Okay, so here we go. U.S. Senators Amy Klobuchar, what? Cloud boot jar doing something good? Jerry Moran, Chris Murphy, Roger Marshall, and Elizabeth Warren reintroduced bipartisan legislation to lift the Cuba trade embargo. The Freedom to Export to Cuba Act would eliminate legal barriers preventing Americans from doing business in Cuba and create new economic opportunities by boosting U.S. exports and allowing Cubans greater access to American goods. The legislation repeals key provisions of existing laws that block Americans from doing business in Cuba, but keeps in place laws that address human rights or property claims against the Cuban government. So they're trying to lift the Cuban embargo or, definitely strengthen the relationship between Cuba and the U.S. This is 100% correct. It's a layup. It's a layup, man. Now, understand something. Under the Obama administration, should I say Obama-Biden administration, this was one of the good things Obama did. He normalized relations with Cuba. He realized this is stupid. We've been fighting for a really long time, and we've been standoffish for a really long time, and nothing good has come of it. It's terrible. So let's just go in a different direction. Look, I'm so concerned about the human rights record. Really? Saudi Arabia's human rights record is way worse, and we're buddy-buddy with them. Israel's human rights record is way worse, and we're buddy-buddy with them. Need I go on? There's so many. We militarily support 73% of the world's dictatorships, and we're going to be angry at Cuba? Look, I'm not saying Cuba's perfect. In many ways, they do have an authoritarian system, but in many ways, they're actually better than a lot of other dictatorships. They've created a lung cancer vaccine. They've given everybody health care. Like, there's a number of things they've done where it's like, okay, wow. As far as dictators go, it's one of the least bad of those types of systems. So Obama and Biden did the right thing when Obama was president. Trump got in there, totally reversed it. Totally reversed. Just like he did with the Iran deal. He just ripped up the Iran agreement. And by the way, killed their top commander who was fighting ISIS in the field, nearly sparking a war. Like, he just, terrible policies. Tried to do a coup in Venezuela. The Trump administration did. And Biden has gone in office, and you know what he's done? Dickie McGee's acts. Nothing. Biden's done nothing. He didn't jump right back in the Iran deal, like he said he would, by the way, when he was campaigning. He said, oh, we'll get right back in it. He didn't get right back in it. He didn't get right back in it at all. The Venezuela thing. Now, our relationship with Venezuela has gotten a little bit better, namely because Saudi Arabia is acting a fool with their oil, and we want cheap oil, so now all of a sudden we're like, yeah, Maduro, yeah, not all that bad, bro. Which I'd much rather have that than our crazy, hawkish hard line where we're trying to secretly coup them on a regular basis. But now we have an example of a bipartisan bill on Cuba. Now, the question is, can this get the 60 votes it needs? That I do not know the answer to. I really don't. A lot of the Republicans are still super hardline on Cuba. And it's obnoxious, and it's dumb, and it's, they have all their propaganda they spew on a regular basis. Like, you're never going to get Marco Rubio to sign on to this. He's going to act like this is propping up dictators and authoritarians. Anyway, let's give Saudi Arabia more money. Let's give it. But look, it's definitely the right direction to go in. And look, I have to plug something here. Excuse me. I think I've plugged it before, but I'm going to plug it again because it's just phenomenal. There's a podcast called The Blowback Podcast. And it's like the history of U.S. foreign policy, and they do little series on different wars, like they did the Korean War, they did the U.S. and Cuba, they did the Iraq War, and it just goes through in incredible detail the history of all of these conflicts, and it would really open your eyes to what our foreign policy is, how this country operates, what our ideology is. And I listened to the whole Cuba series. Man, it ain't even close. We're the baddies. And that's not even a controversial thing to say if you know the history of it. There was a vicious dictator, Batista, who was in power in Cuba, and he was our puppet. And Cuba was basically the playground of America, of wealthy Americans. And you basically had a gangster mafia state in Cuba where you had all these big-time mobsters who had a stake in the casinos in Cuba. Military dictatorship, just abysmal. Human rights record, terrible. They tortured people, etc. And so whatever you think of Fidel Castro, there was replacing of a dictator with a revolution. Even if you have criticisms of Castro, even if you don't like Castro, and all that stuff is fair, and we can go through his record with a fine-tooth comb, and I'll tell you the things that are terrible, and I'll tell you the things that are okay. But the fact of the matter is, Batista had to go. And it was a revolution of the Cuban people that got rid of him, and we refused to let go of that. And we tried to coup Fidel over and over and over and over, and put back in a puppet dictator. Not because we support democracy. No, because we wanted to serve U.S. business interests, and in this case, maybe even mafia interests. So definitely listen to the Blowback podcast. It'll go through the history of it, and you'll be amazed by it. But suffice to say, this is definitely the right way to go. And, I mean, look, I don't know, legally speaking, to what extent Biden can act on this alone, but I think he might be able to act on this alone. So, but I respect this move from the senators. Hopefully it works. The thing is, at this point, we don't even know if it would get through the House, right? Like, would this even get through the House? Because now we have a Republican House. If it was the Democratic House, it would. Republican House, I don't know. But anyway, we'll see what happens, but I certainly like this move from this group of bipartisan senators. If you want to see me and Crystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Crystal Kyle and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take 0 ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.